the LaxFactor podcast. What is up, college lacrosse fans? You're watching episode 243 of the LaxFactor podcast. I am your host, Ted Houston. Today, we're going to talk about some of the interesting games that were played on Sunday, specifically two games that were played between Sunday's recap show and today. We'll talk about Brown's dismantling of Vermont. There's a big game tonight. Towson hosting Loyola. The Greyhounds are going to want to bounce back and pick up a win after losing to Rutgers over the weekend. And then this weekend's just chock full of interesting games across the Division I landscape, and we're going to talk about almost all of them, at least touch on them briefly. First up, though, before I get into it, as always, be sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell if you're on YouTube, share the crap out of the podcast if you're listening or watching elsewhere. And as always, you can go to LaxFactor.com. We provide custom team uniforms and apparel for teams all over the United States. This gear is designed, printed, cut, and sewn in America. So support Made in America for sure. And as always, you can go to LaxFactor.com and watch our videos and things like that as well. But if you want a quote for Team Apparel, hit me up either via the website, LaxFactor.com, or via social media, and we can get your team set up, get a mock-up done up, get you some pricing, and get your team set up with team gear. Now, let me shut up. Let's dive into the first game I want to talk about that was played here on Sunday. It was number 10 Delaware hosting unranked at the time, Villanova. They are ranked now, but because this, the new poll hadn't come out by the time this game was played, I went with what the rankings were then. Now, Delaware, they were the number team in the country on Sunday as they hosted Villanova, and the Wildcats went in and picked themselves up a one-goal win. This game went back and forth all day long with both teams taking turns playing around with the lead. Delaware battled back from a 12-9 deficit halfway through the fourth quarter, and the Blue Hens' Finn Morgan scored on a dish from Jason Sider, knotting things up at 12s with 2:54 left in the game, but it was Nova's Matt Campbell that stuck the game winner with 1:39 left on the clock, dodging down the right alley, putting a shot past Delaware goaltender Matt Kilkeary. Campbell finished the day with 5 goals and a dish, with 3 of those goals and the assist coming all in the second half as Villanova tried to get a lead and then hold Delaware off, and then, was forced to score the game winner. Delaware, they're still playing without Robinson. Ty Kurtz, he was good for 4-2, while J.P. Ward went for 3-2. Delaware's played some solid lacrosse, but they really need Robinson back in that lineup. I'm not 100% sure what his injury is, but I think it's kind of game by game per the telecast in this one, but they're just not the same offensively without him, and getting him back will be huge. Villanova, they had a very solid defensive outing, forcing 7 turnovers, but Delaware shot themselves in the foot numerous times, committing 9 turnovers that were technically logged as unforced. Chet Comizio had a great day on defense for the Wildcats, picking up 7 GBs and forcing a turnover on one of Delaware's final 2 possessions as the Blue Hens tried to tie things back up late. Finn Morgan would get a shot off with 11 seconds to play, hit the pipe. Stevie Jones would pick it up and huff that ground ball upfield, and as time expired, and Villanova would get the win. Villanova dominated gameplay. They dominated in terms of shots, 46-32, shots on goal, 28-20, ground balls, 44-38. So overall, it was a close game, but from a stat line perspective, Villanova really did kind of handle their business, and they pull out this big win here over Delaware. Let's stop talking about this one, and we are going to now talk about the Vermont Brown game. Now, this one surprised me. Right away, it had me raising eyebrows because I didn't expect... it had my eyebrows raised because I didn't expect for the score to be what it was when I turned it on early. So that was bad. The weather was nuts. That was interesting. Total whiteout by halftime. Guys running around like on perfect snowman snow, which means their cleats were just picking up that snow like they would pick up mud in the old days when teams used to still play on grass and muddy fields. And I figured Burke was going to dominate the dot at this game, and that would make this game a close game, and it would come right down to the end, but that was not so. Burke lost 16 of 36. 44% was all he won of the faceoffs in this game, as Matthew Gunty of Brown, he wins 19 of 31 for 61%, and that's 2 years in a row now Gunty has had Burke's number. I believe last year they were pretty even, but I think Gunty won a late faceoff late in that game that helped Brown win it. And in this case, Gunty just dominated Burke all day long, and Brown dominated Vermont in the scoring column. And we all know what happens when Vermont doesn't win games or win the face-off battle. They end up, being in close games or losing games more often than not. Devin McLean, he puts up 9 goals in a dish. an addition this one. So Vermont had a very difficult time bottling up McLean. Trevor Yeboah-Cody, defensive midfielder from a year ago, he's doing a bunch of damage in transition in this game, but he also looked like he may even got some kind of semi-settled offensive runs. The result, Yeboah-Cody goes for a goal and 5 helpers on the day. Brown dominated Vermont from start to finish. They pick up the win, and that is all she wrote. So that's all I want to talk about in terms of games from over the weekend, because I want to dive into the matchups this weekend because we have some really important games popping off here. The first game I want to talk about, number 2 Notre Dame at number 4 Maryland. Maryland coming in at 3-1, Notre Dame at 3-0. Now this is for sure the matchup of the weekend, be certain. So I'll talk about this one first. Both teams have 3 wins, although Maryland has a loss to Loyola and Notre Dame hasn't felt the kiss of defeat quite yet. Maryland comes in with their face-off man, Luke Weirman, and their defense as the core strengths of this team overall. I'd posit they got Makar wearing number 1, but I still think Maryland's best player may very well be Luke Weirman at the face-off dot. They've played better offensively, Maryland has, in wins over Syracuse and Princeton, but to anyone observing, they're definitely being carried by Weirman and this defense thus far. Maryland did lose goaltender Logan McNaney to a season-ending knee injury, and since he went out, they've tried out both Teddy Dolan and Brian Ruppel in cage. Dolan struggled a little bit in his outing against Syracuse. They still pick up the win, but he didn't look great, and Ruppel played very well against Princeton, so I'd imagine we'd see Ruppel start against Notre Dame. Now, on the side of the Irish, it's been a total team effort so far in their first 3 wins. They haven't played the same quality of opponents, I don't believe, that Maryland's played thus far, but Notre Dame was very impressive in their 15-8 drubbing of Georgetown. Now, they haven't been totally reliant on the Kavanaugh brothers offensively, which is a great sign. Now, yes, that's going to sound crazy because the Kavanaugh brothers, Chris has 18 points, Pat has 17, and the next guy, Ricky Ardelli, has 9 points. So it does look like the Kavanaugh brothers have been carrying them, but in that win over the Hoyas, 5 players put up 3 points and 2 guys had 2 points. So when needed, it looks like Notre Dame is going to be able to maybe produce some depth in that scoring output. That's going to be a very good sign for them moving forward. The Notre Dame defense, they should be prepared to just about terrorize Maryland on offense a bit. Maryland doesn't have insanely great ball carriers, and that's going to play into Notre Dame's hands in terms of how the matchups play out overall. So you got Chris Conlon has 4 caused turnovers for Notre Dame on defense so far. Chris Fake 3 caused turnovers. The rest of that Notre Dame defense is playing well so far, and with Liam Entenmann behind them, goals should be a little bit tougher to come by for Maryland than they have been so far in the opponents they faced this season, because I think that other than Loyola, who beat Maryland, Notre Dame, I think, is the best defensive team they've played so far. In the end, I think that Maryland is going to hang in this game, and I think it will be a close game throughout because I think Weirman, who's been spectacular so far this season, we have no reason to think he's going to fall, far off this weekend, especially against the Notre Dame duo. Who's the Notre Dame face-off duo here? They've been playing well here, Lynch and Hagstrom. And mostly it's been Lynch taking face-offs so far for Notre Dame. So there's no reason to think that Weirman isn't going to continue to dominate. If he doesn't, it could be a long day for Maryland. Maybe we see a 5-7 goal spread. So long as Weirman handles his business, I think this is going to be a close game. I think Maryland, also, the defense is going to be able to kind of hang tight with Notre Dame's offense a little bit. But I think where this game gets separated a little bit in favor of Notre Dame is going to be the way the Notre Dame defense matches up against the Maryland offense. I think that Notre Dame is a better defensive team than Maryland is an offensive team, and I think that's going to neutralize Weirman's wins at the faceoff dot enough that Notre Dame's going to be able to pick this win up. So my prediction overall, Notre Dame by 2 or 3 goals. I don't think it's going to be a big spread by any means. I think it should be a good game. Next game, I want to talk about number 3, Cornell at number 8, Ohio State. Ohio State coming in at 3-1, Cornell still 3-0. Now, Cornell won this matchup deuce times a year ago, beating Ohio State at home in early March and then beating them again in the NCAA tournament. Excuse me. I choked on water as I was getting a drink of water before I started this, and I thought my life did pass before my eyes, but I did make it out, and I'm talking to you all, but I might have to clear my throat a couple of times. So yeah, Ohio State's going to have revenge on their minds. This is a much better Ohio State team, in my opinion, especially defensively versus a year ago. They have 3 defenders right now that are capable of guarding an opposing team's number 1 guy. And then lucky for the Buckeyes, they only need 1 of those 3 defenders that are capable of guarding pimps to guard said pimp. And meaning only 1 of their defenders needs to guard C.J. Kirsten. They've got 2 other guys that have experience guarding top-notch offensive players. Cornell, they've looked a little bit shaky defensively at times so far in 2023, and that's going to play nice into the fact that Ohio State is that's going to play nice for Cornell in the sense that as they're still trying to figure things out defensively, Ohio State's still been trying to figure things out offensively themselves. The Buckeyes only put up 8 goals in a win over North Carolina and only 6 goals in that loss to Virginia last weekend. Cornell's defense is somewhere, I think, in line with Carolina's, so that should, the under in this game probably is a good play. Now, a season ago, Cornell's Gavin Adler, one of the best defenders in the country, he handled Ohio State's leading scorer, Jack Myers, held him to like 2 or 3 points or something like that. I think Adler has a little bit less help this year, so I expect Myers to do a bit more damage in this one, although I don't think he's going to go crazy and put up 7 points or anything like that. I think revenge, though, is going to be the topic of the day. I think we see Ohio State come out hungry and ready for a dogfight from the beginning of this game till the end. My prediction, Ohio State gets revenge over Cornell for beating them twice last season, and Ohio State's going to win this one at home by a goal or 2. That's all I have to say about that one. Now, let's talk about the game I'm going to be watching most intently here. And this game actually isn't played until Sunday. Right now, my plan is to go up so long as the weather holds out. We'll see how that goes. Now, Syracuse, they are clinging to that number 20 spot by the skin of their teeth. After starting 3-0, they've lost 2 straight to number 4 Maryland and number 11 North Carolina. Duke's coming off back-to-back wins over Denver and number 10 Penn after losing to number 14 Jacksonville. What we've learned thus far about Syracuse is they're not going to win very many faceoffs, especially in ACC play, where everybody has a killer at the faceoff dot. North Carolina, the least capable faceoff crew that Syracuse will face in terms of conference play, and that it's just going to be worse throughout here. And what's going to be the problem for Syracuse here is if they don't win faceoffs, their defense probably is not good enough to go toe-to-toe with these ACC offenses while losing that possession battle at the same time. Now, Duke, on the other hand, they win faceoffs above a 60% clip thanks to Jake Naso. Naso is sitting at 63% thus far. He's taken all but 15 of Duke's draws this season. Richie USA is going to have a hard time on Sunday, in my opinion, and I think that's going to result in Syracuse's defense and goaltender Will Mark being pressured all day long and kind of playing from their heels all game long against this Duke offense. Now, on top of that, Syracuse isn't built to defend a team like Duke with 3 killers at attack. Landon Clary, he's been drawing opposing teams' top attackmen. He's done an admirable job thus far, but guarding the Duke attack is a whole different ball game compared to what Syracuse has faced so far this season, and I fear that Syracuse is not going to have enough depth at defense to keep this game close overall. My prediction, Duke by 5 to 7 goals. I like that Syracuse typically plays Duke tough, especially at the Dome. Syracuse has kind of been a Duke killer over the course of the last handful of seasons, but I think this season's probably a little bit different here. Duke's attack is just a bunch of monsters. We have a defender that's probably better suited for guarding, the opposing team's 2 or 3 guy, and he's going to have to be guarding their number 1, and it's just going to I have a bad feeling about this game in terms of the face-off dot, and then in terms of we've given up a lot of good shots to teams, and Will Mark has thus far not had a bad game. What's going to happen to the Syracuse defense when Will Mark does have a bad game? It could get ugly. So if Will Mark puts up, say, 70% of his shots, Syracuse is in this ball game. If Will Mark is hanging at 50% like he was last weekend, Syracuse is going to lose this by a margin and drop to 3-3. But we have some favorable matchups coming up for the Orange here. Next game I want to talk about here, unranked and 0-3 Georgetown at number 5 Princeton. Now, this is officially a must-win game for Georgetown. We all keep saying this, despite the fact the Hoyas could still just win their conference tournament and get themselves into the NCAA tournament. But at this stage, they haven't given anyone reason to believe they're actually even capable of winning their conference tournament. They need quality wins to build their resume and, more importantly, to build their confidence. And picking up a victory over number 5 Princeton would be huge. And I actually think that Princeton right now, I think they're overranked. I had Princeton lower in my poll this weekend because even though they've played teams tough, they've played a couple of teams that aren't that great, a little closer than I thought they would. They kind of got beat up a little bit by Maryland last weekend. So I think Princeton probably should be somewhere in the area of 10, not number 5. So I like this matchup for the psyche of Georgetown. If Georgetown can beat the number 5 team in the country, boom, they're back to ranked, even though they're only 1-3. More importantly, they have some confidence going in. The problem for Georgetown ends up being they've got Princeton. Richmond is a good matchup. High Point's a good one for them. Lehigh could kill them at the dot, but they should win that game. But then they get into like Denver, Providence, Marquette. They got Loyola in the mix. So they still have a bunch of tough games ahead of them. But you can see once they get past Princeton, they do have some more favorable matchups over the next 3. So that should build some confidence for them heading into that Denver game, which is going to be important here. Let me go back here. So both teams, they are so-so at the face-off dot overall, but James Riley for Georgetown, he's streaky and capable of getting hot, and when he gets hot, he tends to put not just win draws, but put points up as well. Overall, I think the teams are pretty evenly matched. I like the Hoyas' defense and how they line up against the Princeton offense. I don't think Princeton's defense is built to wreak havoc by any means, and this could kind of be the game that we maybe finally start seeing Georgetown play some semblance of solid offense with all these guys that are trying to figure it out. I just don't see the Hoyas starting 0-4. I think they're going to be hungry. I think that Princeton thus far represents their best shot at a win over the course of these first 4 games here. It's not like Georgetown's been losing to chumps with their losses. Their 3 losses have come to number 15 Hopkins, number 10 Penn, and number 2 Notre Dame. So, like I said, dropping number 5 Princeton could be that boost of confidence they need to kind of go on a run, get some wins under their belt heading into that matchup against Denver. Now, losing to Princeton, though, on the other hand, I say if they win, that's a big confidence boost. I think if they lose to Princeton, that is an enormous kick in the balls, and who knows what's going to happen after that. The 0-4 is ugly, even though the 4 teams that you've lost to thus far are all ranked and quality opponents. It just shows that, yeah, you may be a quality team, but you're not of the same quality as these other teams. So after they had a incredible regular season last year, they get beat in the first round of the NCAA tournament by one of the play-in teams, and now they're 0-3. Not a whole lot of confidence, not a whole lot of feel-good vibes going on in D.C. for Georgetown. In the end, though, like I said, my prediction, Georgetown. I think Georgetown ends up finding a way to win this game by 2 or 3 goals by the end. That's my prediction. Next game we got to talk about, number 12, St. Joseph's at number 15, Johns Hopkins. A banged-up Johns Hopkins squad is getting tested yet again this weekend with a number 12 ranked team coming to town. Thus far, every opponent that 3-2 Hopkins has faced has been ranked except for Utah. Jacksonville's now number 15. Georgetown, at the time Hop beat them, was number 3. Now they're unranked. Carolina's now number 11. Loyola now number 7. So a really good resume thus far for Hopkins. Hopkins, though, they are playing very banged-up lacrosse. They badly needed that win over Utah after dropping 2 straight to Carolina and Loyola after starting 2-0. They were banged up in both of those losses and managed to get a 4-goal win over Utah despite having some guys out, including goaltender Tim Marcille, who played solid lacrosse over their first 4 games. But on the bright side for Hopkins, they've continued to play well and have scrapped and have been in games despite having guys miss time. Versfeld, he stopped 65% of the shots he faced while spelling Marcille in that Utah game. Ian Krampf put up 3 goals in a dish, getting time due to injured teammates. Young gun Matt Collison, he's put up 8 goals, being called, as he's been being called upon to contribute offensively despite his youth. Big boy, I'm a big fan of number 16 for Hopkins and Collison. He's a big boy midfielder that gets to the middle of the field well. If Hopkins is healthy, even just remotely healthy, Angelis and Melendez running around, as long as they're there, then I like their chances against St. Joe's. If those guys are still banged up and missing minutes overall, then I think things are going to be much tougher for Hopkins. Now, on the St. Joseph side, excuse me, Zach Cole is the guy to watch in this one. He's won a whopping 77% of his draws so far in 2023, and the Hopkins duo of Tyler Dunn and Logan Callahan are going to have their hands full. Now, Dunn and Callahan, they've been playing good enough for Hopkins to keep them in games with solid possessions overall. But if they get roached by Cole at the dot, it could be a rough go for Hopkins, especially if injuries continue to cost guys time. I'm beating that to death, I know, but it's a factor. They've had some. Melendez came out looking really good early. He's been banged up. Angelis was looking really good, still looks good, even banged up. Marcial's out. They have other guys out. So I think losing the possession battle to a team that has guys on offense like Carter Page, Matt Baumer, and Levi Anderson overall, I think that's a recipe for disaster. I think that will happen, but for some reason, I just can't count Hopkins out in this one. I'm going, even though everything in my being, and even when I wrote this up, I initially put St. Joseph's by 1 or 2 goals. I deleted that, and I put down prediction Hopkins by 1 or 2 goals. I still like what Hopkins is doing. They're playing at home. St. Joseph's, they don't play a whole hell of a lot of games of this caliber, especially at Homewood Field. So I'm going with Hopkins. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not very bright. I'm a terrible gambler. I've just given up on the gambling shit. I mean, I just drained my DraftKings account over the last 2 weekends down to like $6 that I have in the account at this point. I am just a ridiculously stupid gambler. Next game I want to talk about here, Richmond at number 1 Virginia. Now the Cavs are off to a 3-0 start as expected, with Richmond coming to town and playing them in Charlottesville. The UVA offense have been off the charts good, with both Connor Schellenberger and Peyton Cormier dropping 18 points over their first 3 games. Shelley's been in sharing mode while drawing a lot of attention. He's got 6 goals and 12 helpers. Cormier has benefited from that attention that Schellenberger's gotten. He's gotten free for 15 goals with 3 assists on the season. Richmond, they've won 3 straight since losing 15-4 at Maryland. That was a little bit ugly and uncharacteristic of them. But the quality of their opponents over their first 3, over their 3 wins, it hasn't been anything to write home about. So yes, Richmond has a history of playing well on the road in Charlottesville, but this isn't the same Richmond team that, kind of played well in Charlottesville over those years, and this is a different Cavs team as well. P.D. LaSala, he's been getting things done at the faceoff dot, winning 56% of his draws, but what's more impressive, he's averaging 2 goals a game over the first 3. He has 6 goals. Virginia's defense, they've played extremely well at times, and then they've looked really spotty and sketchy at times. I'll expect to see them play well, at least long enough to get Virginia a big lead against Richmond and then hold off, and the game's going to be over by the time they start playing spotty again. So my prediction, I think Virginia's going to roll. I think Virginia's going to win this game by 9 to 11 goals, despite Richmond's rich history of coming in here and playing tough. I think this offense is fully dialed in. I think their defense is going to get better week in and week out. When you look at it, Nunes has not played great thus far, so I think he's due to have a really good game. So I like Virginia to roll in this one. Next one we got to talk about here, Penn State hosting Penn. Now, I was fairly optimistic that Penn State would be a bit better this season, even though I still said that, the Big Ten is still going to be a tough draw, and I still had them kind of on the bottom half of the Big Ten. Once they lost to Villanova on the road in their second outing, I was like, man, maybe we're wrong. Maybe Penn State's the basement team still in the big. Well, wins over Stony Brook and now over number 13 Yale. Second year in a row they've beat Yale. The Nittany Lions have cracked the top 20. They're hoping to continue their winning ways as they get closer to Big Ten play. Now, Penn, coming off a loss to Duke. I spelt that wrong. Have a lose. Coming off a loss to number 6 Duke after coming out and dealing Georgetown their second loss of the season. In that loss to the Blue Devils, Penn shot the ball like absolute turd. That cost them the game against Duke. While Penn State is better both offensively and defensively, I think Penn's going to more than likely figure out some of those shooting woes that they had against Duke and put on a much better show on Saturday. I think Sam Handley, after a rough outing against Duke, I think he's going to be dodging angry. I don't think Penn State has the defensive firepower to completely hold Handley back. Duke got a great game out of number 19 Stevenson against Handley. I'm not sure that Penn State's going to have the same luck that Duke did overall. And then Cam Rubin, I think he'll continue his shooting clinic. Right now, he's got 7 goals off 9 shots over their first 2 games for Penn. Now, important matchup to watch, Chase Mullins and Hudson Bond against Penn's Chris Arceri at the faceoff dot. These teams are both pretty closely matched in that respect. Neither group has wowed anybody thus far in their limited action. So I think that every possession is going to count in a game like this, especially if this game is close over the course of the fourth quarter. So that should be an interesting matchup to watch as we're trying to figure out, we know what teams have the killers at the faceoff dot. Now we're trying to figure out which teams are going to win on average more than they lose, which teams are going to come in at 55%, only just slightly edging out their opponents on average. So this should be a good matchup to watch. My prediction, though, I think Penn's going to handle their business. I think Penn's going to win this on the road by 2 or 3 goals in this in-state matchup. Now, those are the games I wrote up and I made predictions on, so those are the ones that we count here. Now I'm just going to go through and talk about other games quickly before we get to the end of the show. North Carolina hosting Denver. The way the Tar Heels have been playing so far this season, I like North Carolina in this one. Denver, once again, they have a history coming from the West, hitting this East Coast, specifically playing Duke and North Carolina tough. But I think that right now, North Carolina is playing very good offensive ball. They don't have Chris Gray anymore, but Logan McGovern, the Bryant transfer, has played very well. Lance Tillman has been lancing shots left and right. Sean Goldsmith, the transfer from Mercer, is starting to figure things out. So right now, this North Carolina offense without Gray looks very good, and they're putting up points. Defensively, they've impressed, mostly because Colin Krieg is a killer in cage. Now, why isn't this loading? There we go. Colin Krieg so far, 61%. And I mean, North Carolina's played some good teams. Let's actually go back here. And I want to look at what Krieg has done thus far. Yeah, against Mercer, 77%. Against a very good Hopkins, 67%. Against Ohio State, 62%. Struggled a little bit against Syracuse in ACC play here. But, still, they picked up the win. So I'm a big Colin Krieg fan. I think he's going to factor heavily in this game. Denver has been struggling badly in cage. Thompson played well, I think, in their first outing or two, has struggled since then. So the main place I think that Denver has an advantage, and it might be the only place Denver has an advantage, is Alex Stathakis at the faceoff dot for Denver. So he could help keep Denver close early, but I think in the end, North Carolina is probably going to slow burn this one to victory. I think it'll be a close game, though. I think somewhere between a goal to maybe 4 or 5 goals in favor of Carolina. Denver could win. I just don't think they're going to. I think Carolina's playing really good lacrosse right now. This is tonight's game. This game's being played tonight. Loyola playing on the road at Towson here. Loyola's one of the best defensive teams in the country right now. They're playing really well. Offensively, they haven't fully figured things out yet as we kind of come in here and we see not lighting up the scoreboard by any means, but they did beat Maryland 12-7. They did beat Hopkins 13-8, and they lost to a very good Rutgers team that was able to kind of stymie their offense and hold them under, they held them under 7 goals, but it was their first outing under 10 goals, and Rutgers picks that win up, and Rutgers got insane play out of their goaltender in that game. I don't think that's going to happen against Towson. I think Loyola, I don't think they're going to roll Towson, but I figure they should easily be able to beat Towson by 4 or 5 goals, and I think that, a rout is potentially in the works for this one. High Point and Jacksonville doing battle here. Jacksonville's going to be playing at High Point. Jacksonville's been off for a while. It feels like they haven't played a game in a long time. Yeah, they haven't played a game since the 18th in that win over Marist. So right now, Jacksonville's clinging to that Duke win as we're still here. We've still arrived, and we still deserve to be ranked. So High Point, they've actually after losing badly to Duke and just getting beat up badly by Duke, they've been rolling. Now, granted, they played some crappy opponents other than Navy, but they pick out a huge 1-goal win over Navy, and then they just beat the crap out of Hampton here as well. So this is a big game. This will tell us where both of these teams really are. And like I said, Jacksonville, they almost have to win this game. They can't lose this game because they need to keep building their resume up. Yes, once again, they have a chance at an automatic qualifier, but teams like Jacksonville, High Point, they've relied on that automatic qualifier in the past. They, if they're going to kind of take that next step and become a legitimate contender every year, they have to be putting themselves in position every year to win an at-large bid, even where they don't win their conference tournament. And they have schedules that give them enough chances to get those quality wins to do that. They just have to handle their business. I don't know who to take in this one. High Point's been playing really well offensively. As you see here, Van Overbeek, Maea's impressed despite being an off-ball guy. I was wondering, what's he going to do for points without Asher Nolting there to help him. Overbeek and company have kind of been feeding him the rock. He's been creating offense himself a little bit. So in this one, I'm leaning Jacksonville. I think Jacksonville will probably pull out a very close game. But if Jacksonville could come out and impress and wax High Point, that'll be a very good sign for them. And they need to get a win under their belt after not playing lacrosse for just about 2 weeks. Next one, Delaware hosting Michigan. Delaware, like I said, they just dropped the game here to Villanova. They haven't played anyone, and they haven't blown some of these teams out as badly as I thought. So Michigan should be another good test. Last year, I had thought that Delaware was going to come in and potentially beat Michigan, and Michigan handled Delaware at home. So this season, I think we may see more of that. I mean, Michigan is improved. Michigan's played a tougher schedule, I believe, thus far here. They've already faced Virginia and then some weak games here. That loss to Marquette does not look good here. So Michigan, must-win game for Michigan on the road. And for Delaware, they can still win their conference tournament. Michigan has almost zero chance of winning the Big Ten tournament. So Michigan just has to win, and that's going to be very tough for them to do from here. Delaware could still win their conference tournament, but they're playing some good teams, and they need to beat these big conference teams to kind of continue to take that next step. It helps them in recruiting. It will help build their resume for the tournament. But yeah, I am leaning into Michigan winning this game. Still, unless Robinson's back. You add Mike Robinson to the Delaware roster, changes the face of their offense considerably because it just, Finn Morgan's played well, Clay Miller's played well, but none of those guys are Mike Robinson, so you throw him back in the mix, and that makes it a whole different level of difficult for defenses to match up with those attackmen for Delaware. So I like Michigan in this one, but if Robinson's playing, all bets are off. Another one, Yale, UMass. This one's important because Yale lost here over the weekend. UMass did the same. Who did UMass lose to? UMass lost to Boston U 6-12. That was beyond what they wanted to lose by. And then Yale loses to Penn State by 2 goals here. So both teams are going to be looking for a bounce-back win, with the Ivy being the just absolute monster of a conference that it is. Yes, Paper Tiger, they're not as good as they were last year. They're not handling their out-of-conference business like they were last year. But for a team like Yale, they have to win this game. I expect that they will. I think Yale will win this game, but UMass is scrappy and they're playing at home, so I think it should end up being a close game, but I do like Yale by a handful of goals overall. The freshmen here, it was last weekend in their loss, it was Matt Brandow. I think Brandow was held to like 1-2 on the day, and it was Lyons and Johnson that have been carrying them. So the young guns for Yale have to continue to be able to carry them when Brandow gets taken out of the mix, but Brandow does not get taken out of the mix often. So I bet that his 3 points against Penn State, that's one of his lower outputs all season long. I think Brandow has 6+ points, and they beat UMass handily. Harvard hosting Vermont. Like I said, Vermont coming off a rough loss here to Brown. They could kind of erase some of the terrible feelings from that by coming in and beating Harvard overall. It comes down to one thing here, Tommy Burke. If Tommy Burke comes out and handles his business at the faceoff dot, Vermont will be in this game. If Burke only wins 50%, Harvard's going to win. Vermont's defense is not built to stop big conference offenses overall. They rely on Burke to win that possession battle for them, so that's going to be key in this game. If Burke dominates the dot, this will be a close game. If he doesn't, and he plays similar to how he played here against Brown, it could be a rough day for Vermont again. Rutgers, Utah. I think Rutgers is going to win this game. I'm just talking about it because Rutgers coming off that big win over Loyola. And they, offensively, this is just yet another chance for them to kind of flex their offensive muscle, get things rolling. Ross Scott is their leading scorer thus far, but only by a margin, and it's been huge. Big boy Brian Cameron, Dante Koulis has looked really good for them. Shane Knobloch had a good game last weekend, so Rutgers is going to roll in this one, but I did want to touch on it quickly just because, I like Rutgers, and they're ranked. And what other games here did we not talk about? You know what? We're going to skip that. We're going to hit the D2 calendar. We're going to see what we have on the calendar for Division 2 before we bounce out of here. Let's see. Anything stick out? Oh, these are Wednesday's games. Holy crap. That's the crazy thing about D2 and D3 is every night is filled. And with the D2 games, I just don't know enough about these teams. That Seton Hill Mercy game, that might be decent. Let's see who else we got. Nothing that's popping a wood or anything like that here. Let's check the D3 calendar. Let's see what we got for D3. Sorry, guys. I did want to take a look here. I didn't prep, though. I got to run the kids on a field trip here today up to Elmira when I'm done doing this. I got the day off of work. That's going to be dope. Cortland hosting St. John Fisher. That should be a big one. Christopher Newport. Here, you know what? Let's go to the polls. Let's go to the polls and let's just see here. We had the crazy game here with Gettysburg, like I talked about over the weekend, Gettysburg upsetting Salisbury. But what I had talked about earlier in the week was that game would be setting up a Salisbury tilt at Lynchburg, which was going to be a big game. And then that was also going to set up Gettysburg at Stevenson, which will be a big game. So those should be some big games here in D3. And then who else is going to play? Yeah, we're just going to stop. We're rambling. I'm going to stop. Come back Sunday for damn sure. We got all these games that I'm going to recap on Sunday. As always, you can come to LaxFactor.com, get your team gear quote. If you have a team and you need some apparel, you need t-shirts, reversibles, shorts with pockets, game uniforms, whatever you need, they are designed by me, printed, cut, and sewn in America. So you can go to LaxFactor.com, request a quote through the website, check out some of the gear we've printed in the past, or you can hit me up on social media and ask for a quote there as well. And you can also go to our site and see all our videos and blah, 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 blah. So that is it. Come back Friday for the recap show, Sunday. Come back Sunday for the recap show, early Sunday morning, and I will recap just about every game that's played, and I will do some deep dives into D2 and D3 from now on every weekend because you all love it. So that's it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and Hoost is out. The LaxFactor Podcast.